I started working the night shift at Mercer gas station 3 weeks after my divorce. The place sat alone beside Highway 50 in the middle of the Nevada desert, surrounded by miles of dead land and empty road. No restaurants, no houses, no streetlights, just black desert stretching endlessly beneath the night sky. During the day, truckers and exhausted travelers stopped by for gas, coffee, and cigarettes. But after midnight, the world out there felt abandoned, like civilization simply ended at the edge of the parking lot. Honestly, that was why I took the job. After my wife left, silence became easier than people. She took the apartment, the furniture, even the dog. All I had left was my pickup truck and a backpack full of clothes. Mercer gas station was desperate for a night cashier, and I was desperate not to think about my life. It felt like a fair trade. The manager, Hank, was in his late 60s, with nicotine-stained fingers and permanently tired eyes. The first night he showed me around the station, he kept glancing toward the windows, like he expected someone to be standing outside. "You'll be alone from 10 p.m. till sunrise," he told me while counting cigarette cartons behind the counter. "Most nights are quiet, just restock shelves, clean the coffee station, and try not to fall asleep. What happens if somebody causes trouble?" Hank paused for a second too long. "If anything weird happens, call the sheriff." I laughed a little. What kind of weird? But Hank didn't laugh back. "You'll see." At the time, I thought he was just messing with the new guy. The first few nights were boring. I spent hours listening to old country music on the tiny radio behind the register while organizing candy bars nobody bought anymore. Around midnight, truckers usually stopped in for energy drinks or cheap coffee before disappearing back onto the highway. By 2 a.m., though, the road became completely empty. No headlights, no engines, nothing except the desert wind pushing dust across the parking lot. And every single night around 2:10 a.m., I started feeling this strange pressure in my chest, like anxiety without a reason, like my body sensed something bad before my mind did. The first time I saw him was Thursday night. I remember the exact time because I looked directly at the clock when the bell above the entrance door rang, 2:13 a.m. A man walked inside wearing a gray raincoat, which immediately felt wrong. It hadn't rained in Nevada for weeks. Water dripped slowly from the sleeves of his coat onto the dirty tile floor as he entered. The sound echoed strangely through the empty gas station. He was tall, painfully thin, and moved with this unnatural slowness that instantly made my stomach tighten. His hood covered most of his face, but something about him felt off. Not dangerous exactly, worse than dangerous, unnatural. He didn't say a word. He simply walked toward the refrigerators in the back and stood there motionless, completely motionless. I pretended to organize lottery tickets while watching him through the security monitor beside the register. The camera quality was terrible, all grainy black and white footage, but I could still see enough to make my skin crawl. The man wasn't blinking, not once. For almost 2 full minutes, he stood in front of the refrigerator without moving a single inch. Then suddenly, his head turned directly toward the security camera, toward me. A cold wave spread through my chest. At that exact moment, the overhead lights flickered violently. The monitor exploded into static for a second before cutting out completely. "Jesus Christ," I muttered under my breath. The lights stabilized again, almost immediately, and the man was suddenly standing at the counter. I physically flinched backward. I never heard footsteps, never heard the refrigerator close. One second he was at the back of the store. The next second he stood directly in front of me like he'd always been there. Up close, he smelled awful, like wet dirt mixed with something rotten underneath it. "You got coffee?" he asked softly. His voice sounded wrong too, deep, layered, almost like multiple people whispering beneath the same sentence. Yeah, I answered nervously. "Fresh pots over there." But he didn't move. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then slowly he tilted his head. "You're new?" Something about the way he said it made my chest feel cold. "Yeah," I replied carefully. "What happened to the old cashier?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I just started here." Another silence followed. Then the man smiled. At least I think it was a smile. I still couldn't clearly see his entire face beneath the hood, but I saw something stretch unnaturally wide in the darkness covering his mouth. He stopped looking outside after 2:13, the man whispered. Every muscle in my body tightened. What does that mean? The man ignored the question completely. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and placed several wet dollar bills onto the counter. Water dripped from them onto my hands as I picked them up automatically. Then his hood shifted slightly, just enough for me to finally see his mouth. I wish I hadn't. His lips looked gray, dead gray, and stretched far wider than a human mouth should naturally stretch, almost like the skin around it had been torn apart. The man noticed me staring. His smile widened slowly. Then suddenly, every light inside the gas station went out. Complete darkness swallowed everything instantly. The refrigerators died. The ceiling buzz disappeared. Even the wind outside seemed to vanish. For a moment, the entire world became silent except for my breathing. Then I heard it. Water hitting the floor somewhere in the darkness, moving closer. My hands shook violently as I reached beneath the counter for the flashlight Hank kept there. After fumbling for several seconds, I finally grabbed it and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness. The counter was empty. The man was gone. The front door remained closed. I stood frozen in place, barely breathing. Then suddenly the lights flickered back on all at once. The refrigerators hummed alive again. The ceiling lights buzzed overhead. The station looked normal, except the wet money still sat on the counter. I grabbed the phone immediately and called Hank. He answered, sounding half asleep. What? There was some guy here, I whispered. Long silence. Then Hank asked quietly, Gray raincoat? My stomach dropped. Yeah. Another long silence followed. Finally, Hank sighed heavily. Listen carefully, he said. If he comes back, don't look outside after 2:13 a.m. What the hell are you talking about? Just don't do it. Hank, the call disconnected. I stared at the phone in confusion before slowly turning toward the front windows of the gas station. Outside, the desert looked completely black beneath the parking lot lights. At first, everything seemed empty. Then I noticed the footprints, wet footprints, dozens of them, not leading away from the station, circling it over and over again around the building like someone had spent hours walking through the darkness outside, watching the station, watching me. Then suddenly, a loud scratching sound came from directly above my head. I froze instantly. Another scratch echoed across the ceiling, slow, heavy, like fingernails dragging across metal. The sound moved gradually toward the back storage room before stopping completely. Silence filled the station again, and then the security monitor flickered. Camera 4 activated by itself. The rear outside camera. At first, the screen showed only static and darkness. Then slowly, the image cleared, and I saw him. The man in the gray raincoat stood behind the gas station, perfectly still beneath the darkness, looking directly into the camera. Even from that distance, I could still see his smile. Then slowly he lifted one long finger and pointed upward, toward the roof above me. The bell above the entrance door rang softly. Deputy Collins and I both turned toward the front of the store at the exact same time. Nobody stood there. The glass door remained closed. The parking lot outside was empty again, but the security monitors still showed the 3 men in gray raincoats standing beneath the gas station lights, smiling directly into the cameras. My throat went dry. That's impossible, I whispered. Collins didn't answer. His hand tightened around the grip of his gun as he stared at the screens. For the first time since he arrived, I saw genuine fear in his face. Then one of the monitors flickered. The 3 figures disappeared. A second later, Camera 2 activated automatically, the rear side of the building, and there they were again, standing directly behind the gas station now, closer than before, completely motionless. I felt panic rising in my chest. What are they? Collins swallowed hard before answering. Nobody knows. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed violently. One by one, several bulbs exploded, showering tiny pieces of glass onto the floor. Half the station fell into darkness immediately. Then came the scratching again, not above us this time, inside the walls. Slow scraping sounds moved through the station around us like something crawling between the walls themselves. I could hear it passing behind the shelves, behind the refrigerators, beneath the floor. The building suddenly felt alive and hungry. Deputy Collins stepped closer to the counter without taking his eyes off the monitors. "Listen carefully," he said quietly. "No matter what happens, do not go outside." Before I could respond, the radio on his shoulder crackled loudly. Static filled the station. Then a voice pushed through the noise, weak, terrified. "Help me!" Collins froze instantly. It was Trevor's voice. "I'm outside," the voice whispered through the radio. "Please, let me in." Every hair on my body stood up. Collins slowly grabbed the radio. "Trevor?" Static crackled again. Then came soft crying. "I don't want to stay out here anymore." The voice sounded broken, exhausted, like someone freezing to death in the dark. Suddenly, loud knocking exploded against the front window. I nearly jumped out of my skin. A figure stood outside the gas station now. A young man, early 20s, wearing a Mercer gas station employee jacket. Trevor. His face looked pale beneath the parking lot lights, and blood covered one side of his neck. Tears streamed down his face as he pounded desperately against the glass. "Please let me in," he screamed. Collins looked horrified. "Oh God." Trevor kept banging against the window harder and harder. "Please, they won't let me leave." I instinctively moved toward the door, but Collins grabbed my arm violently. "No, look at him." "That isn't Trevor anymore." The young man outside suddenly stopped crying, stopped moving completely. Then slowly, his smile stretched wider across his face, too wide, exactly like the man in the raincoat. My stomach dropped. Trevor tilted his head unnaturally before speaking again through the glass. "You looked outside." The lights flickered violently, and Trevor vanished, just disappeared. The parking lot became empty again. I stumbled backward in horror while Collins whispered curses under his breath. Then suddenly the power died completely. Darkness swallowed the station. The refrigerator shut off instantly. The buzzing lights vanished. The only illumination left came from the pale moonlight outside the windows. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then we heard footsteps, slow footsteps, inside the gas station, not outside, inside. My pulse hammered violently in my ears as Collins pulled out his flashlight and aimed it toward the aisles. The beam revealed nothing at first. Empty shelves, darkness. Then the flashlight landed on a figure standing near the coffee machine. The man in the gray raincoat, completely still. Water dripped slowly from his sleeves onto the floor. I worked the graveyard shift at a gas station outside Odessa, Texas for almost 8 months before I realized someone was living above the ceiling. The station sat beside an empty stretch of interstate surrounded by dead fields and rusted fences. During the day, the place stayed busy enough. Truckers came through constantly. Ranch workers stopped for coffee before sunrise, and families heading west usually filled up there before the next 100 miles of nothing. But nights were different. After midnight, the station felt disconnected from the rest of the world. The only sounds came from the refrigerators humming against the back wall and the buzzing fluorescent lights overhead. Most nights I sat behind the counter drinking burnt coffee and watching headlights pass through the darkness outside. It wasn't a bad job. Honestly, I liked the isolation. After my younger brother died, silence became easier than people. I stopped answering calls, stopped visiting friends. Nights at the gas station gave me a place where nobody expected conversation. At least that's what I told myself. The noises started sometime around November. At first it sounded like rats inside the ceiling, scratching, soft footsteps overhead. Sometimes I'd hear something dragging slowly above the aisles after 2 a.m. The building was old, so I ignored it. Every old place makes noises at night. Then one morning while restocking cigarettes behind the counter, I noticed something strange. One of the ceiling tiles above the coffee station had moved slightly, just enough to leave a narrow black gap. I grabbed a ladder from the storage room and pushed the tile back into place. That should have been the end of it. But the next night, it had moved again, this time farther, like someone had pushed it upward from above. I told the manager about it during shift change. His name was Rick, heavyset guy in his 50s, with permanent bags under his eyes. "You got raccoons," he muttered while signing paperwork. "Inside the ceiling? Happens. You should probably call somebody." Rick shrugged. "Owner won't spend money unless the building catches fire." That night the noises returned. Around 3:15 a.m., while cleaning the coffee machines, I heard footsteps Directly above me, slow footsteps, heavy enough to make the ceiling creak. I looked up automatically. The footsteps stopped immediately. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then something shifted softly above the ceiling tile, like whoever was up there had slowly crawled backward. A cold feeling spread through my stomach. I grabbed the ladder again and climbed up carefully beneath the loose tile. The entire station suddenly felt too quiet. Even the refrigerators seemed quieter than usual. I pushed the ceiling tile upward slowly. Darkness waited above me. The smell hit first. Rotten food, body odor, something sour and damp. I aimed my flashlight into the opening. At first I saw pipes, insulation, and wooden beams. Then I saw the mattress. My heart nearly stopped. Someone had built a sleeping area above the ceiling. There were blankets up there, empty water bottles, canned food, a flashlight, piles of dirty clothes. Someone had been living above the gas station, directly above me. I climbed down immediately and locked myself behind the counter while trying to decide what the hell to do. My first instinct was to call the police. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The mattress above the ceiling looked freshly used. Whoever lived up there was probably still there, watching me. I spent the rest of the shift trying not to look upward. Every small sound made my chest tighten. Around sunrise, I finally told Rick everything. Instead of looking shocked, he just stared at me silently. Then he sighed and, "You shouldn't have gone up there." Something about the way he said it made me uncomfortable immediately. "You knew?" Rick rubbed his face tiredly before answering. "Couple years ago we had another overnight employee, kid named Danny." He paused. "He started hearing noises too. What happened?" Rick didn't answer right away. "He quit." The response felt rehearsed. "You sure?" Rick looked toward the dark windows behind me. "Just leave the ceiling alone," he muttered quietly. That should have been enough for me to quit. But fear does strange things to people. Instead of leaving, I became obsessed. Over the next few nights, I started noticing more things. Food missing from shelves, bathroom sink wet, even when nobody used it. Items moved slightly out of place after I turned my back. And every single night, around 3 a.m., the footsteps returned. One night, I finally decided to stay after my shift ended. I hid my truck behind the building where it couldn't be seen from the road. Then I waited inside the storage room with the lights off. The station closed at sunrise. Rick locked the doors and left around 6:30 a.m. Then silence filled the building. For almost an hour, nothing happened. Then I heard it. Movement above the ceiling. Soft, crawling sounds. I held my breath as the loose ceiling tile dial above the coffee station slowly lifted upward. A hand reached down, human, thin fingers gripping the edge carefully. Then someone climbed out. I nearly stopped breathing. The person was tall but painfully skinny beneath layers of filthy clothes. Long dark hair hung around a pale face covered in dirt. At first I thought it was a man. Then the figure stepped fully into the light. It was a woman, or at least I think it used to be. She looked starved. Her movements were nervous and animal-like, constantly glancing around the station like she expected someone to attack her. She walked toward the shelves and began stuffing food into a backpack. I should have said something, should have called for help, but something about her terrified me. Not because she looked dangerous, because she looked broken beyond repair. Suddenly she stopped moving. Slowly, she turned her head toward the storage room, toward me. For one horrible second, our eyes met through the darkness, and she smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It looked forced, like she'd forgotten how people smile naturally. Then she whispered softly, "He knows you saw me." My stomach dropped. Before I could respond, the front entrance suddenly unlocked. Rick stepped inside. The woman froze instantly. Rick looked exhausted rather than surprised. "You should have stayed hidden," he said quietly. The woman backed away, trembling. "What the hell is going on?" I shouted. Rick ignored me completely. Instead, he looked at the woman sadly. "You need to go back up." The woman began shaking her head violently. "No," she whispered. "Please, no." Fear crawled up my spine. Rick slowly looked toward me. Then he sighed. "She was abducted 12 years ago." The words hit me like ice water. "What?" "She escaped 6 months ago," Rick continued quietly. "Crawled out of a drainage tunnel behind the interstate." I stared at him in disbelief. "Then why the hell is she living here?" Rick's expression changed, not guilt, fear, because he keeps finding her. The woman suddenly started crying, quiet, terrified crying. Then all the lights inside the station shut off at once. Darkness swallowed everything, and from somewhere outside the building came slow footsteps crunching across the gravel parking lot. The woman collapsed instantly. No, 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 no. Rick looked toward the windows in horror. He's here. A pair of headlights appeared outside. An old pickup truck slowly rolled into the parking lot. The engine shut off. Nobody moved. Then came 3 knocks against the front door. Slow, calm, patient. The woman began sobbing harder. Rick whispered something under his breath that sounded like a prayer. Another knock echoed through the station. Then a man's voice spoke softly from outside. You took something that belongs to me. I couldn't move. The voice sounded normal. That was the worst part. No anger, no shouting, just calm certainty. The woman grabbed my arm with freezing fingers. If he sees you, she whispered, he won't stop. Then the security lights outside suddenly turned on, and I finally saw the man standing beyond the glass door. Tall, middle-aged, wearing work boots and a denim jacket, smiling like this was all perfectly ordinary. Then he raised one hand, slowly, and pointed directly at me. The gas station sat alone beside Highway 9, 40 miles outside a dying town called Blackwater, Arizona. Most drivers passed without noticing it. Half the neon sign had burned out years ago, and from the highway the station looked abandoned. Just another forgotten building rotting in the desert. That was exactly why Caleb liked working there. Night shifts stayed quiet. A few truckers stopped for gas after midnight, maybe a traveler heading toward Nevada, but most nights dragged by in silence. Caleb usually spent the hours drinking burnt coffee, listening to old baseball games on the radio, and trying not to think about how badly his life had fallen apart. At 29, exhaustion already felt permanent. His father had died 6 months earlier. His girlfriend left soon after. Bills stacked faster than he could pay them. The gas station job wasn't much, but it kept him alive, and for a while, the silence helped until the girl arrived. It happened during monsoon season on a Tuesday night. Rain slammed against the roof, hard enough to rattle the windows, while thunder rolled endlessly across the desert. Around 1:40 a.m., Caleb stood behind the counter, watching the storm, when headlights suddenly appeared on the highway. A car swerved violently into the parking lot. The driver's door flew open before the vehicle fully stopped. A young woman stumbled into the rain. She nearly fell through the entrance a few seconds later, soaked completely and gasping for breath. Mud covered the knees of her jeans, and one side of her face was bruised, dark purple. Please lock the door, she whispered. Caleb stared at her for half a second. What happened? Please, she said again, voice shaking. He's behind me. The fear in her eyes felt real enough that Caleb immediately locked the entrance. The girl kept glancing toward the highway through the windows, as if expecting someone to appear at any second. You hurt? Caleb asked carefully. She nodded too fast. I just need a phone. There's one behind the counter. She hurried over and grabbed the receiver with trembling hands. Caleb noticed long scratches running across both her arms. Older wounds, not fresh ones, like thorn bushes had torn into her skin days earlier. The girl dialed a number. Nothing. No sound at all. She slowly lowered the phone from her ear. The line's dead. Caleb frowned and took the receiver himself. Silence. No dial tone. The storm probably knocked it out, he muttered. You want me to call the sheriff from my cell? The girl's expression changed instantly. No police. Why? She didn't answer. Instead, she wrapped her arms around herself beside the coffee station, staring at the dark highway beyond the windows. Up close, Caleb realized she looked younger than he first thought, maybe 22. Pale skin, dark wet hair stuck to her cheeks. Red desert mud coated her sneakers. You want to tell me what happened? For several seconds, she said nothing. Then, finally, I saw someone standing on the road. Thunder cracked outside. A man, she continued softly, right in the middle of the highway. Caleb waited quietly. My headlights hit him, but he didn't move. He just stood there smiling. A cold knot tightened in Caleb's stomach. I thought maybe he needed help, so I slowed down. Her breathing became uneven. Then I realized he was covered in blood. Rain hammered harder against the windows. What happened after that? He started walking toward my car. Something about the way she said it made the image feel horribly real inside Caleb's mind. I drove away, she whispered, but every time lightning lit up the road, he was closer. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered once, then again. Caleb glanced upward uneasily. When he looked back, the girl was staring toward the parking lot. He found me. Headlights appeared through the rain, far down Highway 9, slowly approaching. The girl backed away from the windows immediately, breathing faster now. That's him. A black pickup truck rolled into the parking lot and stopped near the pumps. Its headlights shut off. Neither of them moved. Rain blurred the windshield too heavily to see inside. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, broad shoulders, dark jacket, baseball cap. At first glance, he looked ordinary, but something about him felt wrong. Too calm, too still. The man crossed the parking lot without hurrying once, despite the storm drenching him completely. The girl grabbed Caleb's arm hard enough to hurt. "Don't let him in." The stranger reached the entrance and knocked softly against the glass. 3 slow knocks. Caleb stared at him through the door. The man smiled politely and pointed toward the girl behind Caleb. "I think," he said calmly, "my daughter is confused." The girl shook her head violently. Tears streamed down her face. "He's lying." The stranger kept smiling. "She's been having episodes lately," he continued. "I'm just trying to bring her home." "Please," the girl whispered to Caleb. "If he gets inside, I die." Lightning illuminated the parking lot for a split second, and Caleb finally saw it. Blood covered the man's hands, not streaks, not stains. His hands looked soaked in it. At that exact moment, every refrigerator in the station shut off. The constant humming disappeared instantly. Silence swallowed the building. The stranger outside stopped smiling, then tilted his head slightly. A soft, wet sound came from somewhere behind Caleb. He turned. The girl was gone. His stomach tightened instantly. "Hello?" No answer. At the end of the back hallway, the bathroom door creaked open by itself. Caleb grabbed the flashlight beneath the counter and moved carefully toward it. The beam shook in his hand as he pushed the door wider. The bathroom was empty, but across the mirror, written in dripping water, were 5 words. "He found me again." Caleb backed away. Then the entrance bell rang. He spun toward the front of the store. The stranger stood inside beside the shelves. The front door remained locked behind him. Rainwater dripped from his jacket onto the floor. Caleb's chest tightened. "How did you get in here?" The man ignored the question completely. Instead, he looked toward the dark hallway behind Caleb. "She told you about the road, didn't she?" Caleb didn't answer. The stranger sighed, almost tiredly. "She always tells people the same story." "What did you do to her?" For the first time, the smile disappeared. "What I had to." Thunder rolled across the desert, and suddenly Caleb noticed something horrifying. The man had no reflection in the front windows behind him. None. The stranger noticed Caleb staring. Then the grin slowly returned. "She never should have stopped the car that night," he whispered. The lights overhead exploded. Darkness consumed the gas station. Caleb heard movement somewhere inside the store, dragging footsteps, slow, uneven. Then the girl's voice emerged from the darkness. "He killed me here." Caleb froze. The flashlight beam shook violently in his hand before landing on the security monitors above the counter. Every screen showed the same grainy footage. Black and white surveillance video from years earlier. The parking lot, a terrified young woman stumbling through the rain toward the station entrance. The same girl. Timestamp, October 17th, 2019, 1:43 a.m. Caleb's blood went cold. On screen, the girl pounded desperately against the locked entrance, while a man walked toward her from the darkness beyond the gas pumps. The same man standing inside the station now. The footage continued silently. The girl screamed for help. Nobody came. Then the man grabbed her, dragged her screaming away from the lights. The video cut to black. Caleb stared at the monitor in horror. "She wasn't my daughter," the stranger whispered behind him. Caleb turned slowly. The man stood only a few feet away, smiling wider than before. "She was my first."